Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, September 9th, 2022. Great Britain's King Charles III expressing profound sorrow over the death of Queen Elizabeth II in his first speech to his country. The king also renewing the pledge his mother made when she took the throne 70 years ago, a promise of lifelong service. We will hear from King Charles and talk with the Washington Post London bureau chief about what kind of king he will be, some reforms he might make to the monarchy, and whether he'll continue to express views on issues such as climate change. British House of Commons meeting so members can pay tribute to Queen Elizabeth. Some of the memories tearful, others heartwarmingly humorous. President Joe Biden in Ohio today for the groundbreaking of a $20 billion Intel semiconductor computer chip factory. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is at NATO headquarters. He and the NATO Secretary General asked by reporters why Ukraine has been so successful in its military counteroffensive against Russian forces. And a September 11th attack anniversary ceremony at the Pentagon, honoring not only those who lost their lives that day, but the heroes who were working that day and helped save others. King Charles III was greeted by crowds of well-wishers outside Buckingham Palace as he returned to London for the first time as king following the death yesterday of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II.
God save the king! God save the king!
Later, King Charles giving his first televised address, pre-recorded. He began with a tribute to his mother, who reigned as Great Britain's queen for that record 70 years.
I speak to you today with feelings of profound sorrow. Throughout her life, Her Majesty the Queen, my beloved mother, was an inspiration, an example to me and to all my family. And we owe her the most heartfelt debt any family could owe to their mother, for her love, affection, guidance, understanding, and example. Queen Elizabeth was a life well lived, a promise with destiny kept, and she is mourned most deeply in her passing. That promise of lifelong service I renew to you all today. Alongside the personal grief that all my family are feeling, we also share with so many of you in the United Kingdom, in all the countries where the Queen was head of state, in the Commonwealth and across the world, a deep sense of gratitude for the more than 70 years in which my mother, as Queen, served the people of so many nations.
Great Britain's King Charles III, part of a video address airing today. He also promised to honor his mother's service by carrying on his mother's legacy, saying our values have remained and must remain constant. And he spoke about how his life now changes as he moves from prince to king.
The role and the duties of monarchy also remain, as does the sovereign's particular relationship and responsibility towards the Church of England, the church in which my own faith is so deeply rooted. In that faith and the values it inspires, I have been brought up to cherish a sense of duty to others and to hold in the greatest respect the precious traditions, freedoms, and responsibilities of our unique history and our system of parliamentary government. As the Queen herself did with such unswerving devotion, I too now solemnly pledge myself, throughout the remaining time God grants me, to uphold the constitutional principles at the heart of our nation. And wherever you may live in the United Kingdom, or in the realms and territories across the world, and whatever may be your background or beliefs, I shall endeavor to serve you with loyalty, respect, and love, as I have throughout my life. My life will, of course, change as I take up my new responsibilities. It will no longer be possible for me to give so much of my time and energies to the charities and issues for which I care so deeply. But I know this important work will go on in the trusted hands of others.
An article in the Washington Post begins, "What sort of king will Charles III be?" The reporter who wrote that is William Booth, the London bureau chief for the Post, who joins us now by phone. Thank you so much. Your article goes on, Charles has opinions, he expresses them, he's 73, he may not be able to turn it off. You heard his first speech today. What did you glean from that?
Well, he gave deep condolences and shared deep grief with the nation and the Commonwealth. He referred to my darling mama, his mother, the Queen, and thanked her so very much to her devotion to his own family and to the family of nations, right, that she has so long served. And the speech felt very heartfelt. It wasn't very long, but it was somber. He got through it quite well. It was pre-recorded, but it was a good speech, and it was a profound speech in a way, because he echoed what his mother said when she was 21 years old. His mother said, before you, my whole life, whether long or short, shall be devoted to your service. And Charles basically said ditto. No matter how much remaining time God grants me, I will uphold my constitutional duties and serve the nation. So it was a kind of a profound moment.
Now, does that mean the issues that he has been involved in, he may have to pull back from?
He suggested in the thing that some of his charities and his activism he will have to pull back for. He won't have the time as sovereign, and he has said that before. That I think he did a great quote in a BBC documentary a few years ago, and said, "But look, I'm not stupid. I know I can't carry on the way I've carried on as prince, right? When I become king, but we'll see. He will be a different cat." In Buckingham Palace, and he has held these positions for so long, so passionately, global warming and the environment and species devastation. I don't know if he'll be able to turn it off. His biographers think that he kind of will try and might not succeed. That it will eke out a little bit, which would kind of make sense. It would be like if you or I, really believed in something very passionately. You were 73 years old, and then they tell you to kind of not shut up, but kind of not stop talking about it, particularly when he has the best bully pulpit in the world.
A sovereign in Great Britain expressing views, I guess, is only a problem if others think it's a problem. Might anyone think it's a problem?
Yes. I mean, of course they will, right? Because the Queen's genius is she didn't express opinions, particularly of any political or partisan nature. What did the Queen think about Brexit? I have no idea. And I've heard people speculate, but we really have no idea. What did she think of this prime minister or that prime minister, the Tory party or the Labour party? We really don't know. And this isn't the same with Charles. I mean, Charles has been an open book now for 50 years. We know what Charles thinks about a lot of stuff. Not politics. He doesn't get that deeply into politics, but he has lots of opinions about, the environment and what cities should look like, and urban blight and cars and pollution and things. If he expresses those opinions, certainly, as we know in America and in Britain, half the people will like it and half the people won't like it. And that was the genius of his mom, not to get into that half and half, right? To just have people kind of like her and not know exactly what she's thinking.
We're talking with William Booth of the Washington Post in London. Is Charles liked by the British people?
Charles is sort of more or less liked. He's not loved. Charles has some baggage. Some people will never forgive him for his, disastrous marriage to Princess Diana and then her tragic death. They divorced. Then Charles did marry his lifelong love, Camilla, so he gets some props for that. And he's steadfast since that, bad period in the 90s. He's kind of kept on keeping on. He's not out of the woods yet. He's not liked or respected at the stratospheric levels that his mother is. He's not liked as much as his eldest son, Prince William, but he's liked more than like Harry and Meghan. So he's kind of in the middle of the pack right now in the royal family.
And can you see any changes or reforms that he might make to the monarchy?
Yeah, he has said he's going to do some things, that he's going to slim it down a little bit. There'll be less working royals running around the country. I mean, there's not really that many right now, so he might pop off a few who don't get to keep their day job as working royals. And he has kind of promised to return to Buckingham Palace, which his mother sort of not abandoned but moved away from, spent most of her time at Windsor. And he kind of wants to rejuvenate, I think, Buckingham Palace as like a center for the monarchy, and maybe a center of even life, like more events happening at Buckingham Palace, and more concerts and more meetings and conferences and more people coming and going to make it sort of alive again. It was kind of dull and dead for a number of years under the Queen. So he'll do things like that, and other things about how the monarchy is deployed around the world. We'll see whether he brings back his son, Prince Harry, and Meghan to serve any sort of useful role. I think Prince Andrew is still pretty much in the wilderness, and I don't see Prince Charles bringing his younger brother back anytime soon. But, wait 5 years.
As you've been watching this play out over the past day, Queen Elizabeth dying and the new king now on the throne, has anything surprised you about the process or the reaction in Great Britain?
The reaction in Great Britain has been one of sorrow, but it hasn't been the spasm of kind of almost sort of like a crazy grief that greeted the death of Princess Diana here 25 years ago. I mean, that was like a big deal. It was so surprising, so sudden. She was young, died in a car crash, Paris tunnel. People were just really just rent by that. The Queen was 96. She'd been in failing health for the last year or so. Not unexpected. People are sad. They knew this was coming. They have a new king. The new king is there. He's, doing a good job on day one. So no huge surprises yet. They're keeping on doing the thing that this House of Windsor does well, which is preserve and protect the monarchy.
William Booth is the London bureau chief for The Washington Post. Find his stories at WashingtonPost.com. Joining us from London. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
King Charles III, in a video address, also saying his eldest son William and his wife Catherine now have the titles of Prince and Princess of Wales, as William becomes heir to the throne. British Parliament suspending regular business while the country is in mourning. Only emergency or pressing matters will be considered until the funeral of the Queen. Today, Parliament meeting to let members speak about what the Queen meant to them and the country. Here is the Labour Party leader, Keir Starmer.
Today, our country, our people, this House are united in mourning. Queen Elizabeth II was this great country's greatest monarch. And for the vast majority of us, it feels impossible to imagine a Britain without her. All our thoughts are with her beloved family, our royal family, at this moment of profound grief. This is a deep and private loss for them, yet it's one we all share, because Queen Elizabeth created a special personal relationship with us all. That relationship was built on the attributes that defined her reign: her total commitment to service and duty, her deep devotion to the country, the Commonwealth, and the people she loved. In return for that, We loved her. And it is because of that great shared love that we grieve today. For the 70 glorious years of her reign, our Queen was at the heart of this nation's life. She did not simply reign over us. She lived alongside us. She shared in our hopes and our fears, our joy and our pain, our good times and our bad.
British Labour Party leader Keir Starmer. Labour is the main opposition currently in the House of Commons. The leaders of other parties also speaking, the Prime Minister Liz Truss from the Conservatives, the head of the Liberal Democrats and the Scottish National Party and others. Not totally somber all around. There were some funny moments. Boris Johnson, former Prime Minister, recalling the 2012 London Olympics, the opening ceremony with the Queen filming a special scene with actor Daniel Craig, who was playing James Bond at the time. And then something else happened in the stadium, and some people thought it was the real Queen.
And over that extraordinary span of public service, with her naturally retentive and inquiring mind, I think, and doubtless many of the 15 would agree, that she became the greatest statesman and diplomat of all. And she knew instinctively how to cheer up the nation, how to lead a celebration. I remember her innocent joy more than 10 years ago after the opening ceremony of the London Olympics, when I told her that the leader of a friendly Middle Eastern country seemed actually to believe that she had jumped out of a helicopter in a pink dress and parachuted into the stadium. And I remember her equal pleasure on being told just a few weeks ago that she had been a smash hit in her performance with Paddington Bear.
Former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson of the Conservative Party in the House of Commons today. Another story about Queen Elizabeth II from another former Prime Minister, Theresa May.
Her Majesty loved the countryside, and she was down to earth and a woman of common sense. I remember one picnic at Balmoral which was taking place in one of the bothes on the estate. The hampers came from the castle and we all mucked in to put the food and drink out on the table. I picked up some cheese, put it on a plate and was transferring it to the table. The cheese fell on the floor. I had a split-second decision to make. I picked up the cheese, put it on the plate and put it on the table. And I turned round to see that my every move had been watched very carefully by Her Majesty the Queen. I looked at her, she looked at me, and she just smiled. And the cheese remained on the table.
Former British Prime Minister Theresa May, Conservative, at today's session of Parliament. Harriet Harman is a Labour Party member and was dubbed by Theresa May a couple of years ago Mother of the House for setting the record as longest ever continuously serving female member of Parliament in the House of Commons. Harriet Harman, too, today had a good story to tell about the Queen.
After Labour won the election in 1997, I went up to the palace where, like the other new Secretaries of State, she appointed me to the Privy Council and bestowed on me the seals of office. They are actual seals which are given to you and you take back to your department to be locked in a safe. But when just a year later I was sacked, and the seals taken out of the safe and taken back to Buckingham Palace, my diary was empty and my phone stopped ringing. My office was astonished to get a call from Buckingham Palace. No one else wanted to have anything to do with me, but the Queen wanted to see me. I was invited to take tea with the Queen for her to thank me for my service as Secretary of State. My point is that the relationship between our Queen and Parliament and our Queen and government was never just on paper, but was always active and always encouraging.
Member of Parliament Harriet Harman at today's special session of the British House of Commons, members reflecting on the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. The British news site Chronicle Live writes that senior MPs will meet in Parliament for a rare Saturday sitting this weekend to swear allegiance to the new king. King Charles III will be formally proclaimed king at an Accession Council meeting in St. James Palace on Saturday before Parliament convenes in the afternoon. Every MP will have the option of taking an oath to the king when the House returns, but are not obliged to. President Joe Biden confirming today that he will attend the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II, telling reporters, "I don't know what the details are yet, but I'll be going." Funeral expected to take place within the next 10 days at Westminster Abbey in central London. The Queen will be buried at St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, along with her mother, father, and husband, Prince Philip. Last night, President Biden speaking about the Queen at the start of a DNC meeting in the Washington, D.C. area.
Before I begin, I want to say a few words about Queen Elizabeth. I just stopped by the British Embassy to sign the condolence book in her honor. I had the opportunity to meet her before she passed, and she was an incredibly gracious and decent woman. And the thoughts and prayers of the American people are with the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth in their grief.
President Joe Biden Thursday night. The Secretary of State Antony Blinken also adding his condolences today. It was at the start of a news conference during his visit to NATO headquarters in Brussels.
Before speaking about what brings me here today, I'd like to join Jens in taking a moment just to honor the truly extraordinary life of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. On her 21st birthday, then Princess Elizabeth committed to dedicating her life to serving the people of the Commonwealth. For more than 70 years, a period during which the United Kingdom and the world witnessed unprecedented change, the Queen did just that, while personifying a sense of stability and continuity in turbulent times. She was a powerful unifying force, a source of comfort and resilience to millions of people from all walks of life. On behalf of the United States, I extend our deepest condolences to our British friends, to the government of the United Kingdom, to the royal family.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken. We'll hear more from the Secretary about Ukraine's military counteroffensive against the invading Russian forces later in this program. Washington Today continues in a moment.
There are a lot of places to get political information, but only at C-SPAN do you get it straight from the source. No matter where you are from or where you stand on the issues, C-SPAN is America's network. Unfiltered, unbiased, word for word. If it happens here, or here, or here, or anywhere that matters, America is watching on C-SPAN, powered by cable.
And welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile video app and wherever you get your podcasts. From NBC News, President Joe Biden traveled to Ohio on Friday for the groundbreaking of Intel's new semiconductor manufacturing facility near Columbus, where he highlighted planned projects and the law he signed that boosts computer chip production. The president's visit comes after he signed the CHIPS and Science Act into law in mid-August. Proponents of the measure say manufacturing microchips domestically, rather than relying on chip makers in China, Taiwan, and elsewhere, is critical to U.S. national security, especially when it comes to chips used for weapons and military equipment. The package also includes tens of billions of dollars more in authorizations for science and research programs, as well as regional technology hubs around the country. That from NBC News. There were both Democratic and Republican Ohio lawmakers joining the president. Here's Ohio's Republican Governor Mike DeWine.
My fellow Ohioans, this is an historic moment for the Buckeye State. By choosing Ohio, Intel has recognized what we have known all along, and that there is simply no better place to raise a family than Ohio. No better place to live. No better place to start or to grow a business. And no place that provides more opportunity than the state of Ohio. My fellow Ohioans, by choosing Ohio, Intel has placed its faith in you. They have placed their faith in our women and our men who are building these fabs right now.
Ohio Republican Governor Mike DeWine in New Albany, Ohio. A lectern set up next to the construction site for that groundbreaking ceremony of the new Intel computer chip factory. $20 billion investment. It will employ over 7,000 workers during the construction, and then when built, 3,000 workers in operation. President Biden today calling it a big economic win.
There's kind of a tradition here. The Wright brothers, Neil Armstrong, John Glenn, they defined America's spirit, a spirit of daring and innovation. Pat Chase laid out Intel's vision that builds on that legacy. A brand new $20 billion campus, 7,000 construction jobs, union construction jobs, 3,000 full-time jobs that will pay an average of $135,000 a year, and not all of them will require a college degree once these facilities are built. And here's a critical piece. Intel is using a project labor agreement for this investment. For the folks at home, these are agreements contractors, subcontractors, and union put in place before construction begins. They ensure major projects are handled by well-trained, well-prepared, highly skilled workers. They resolve disputes ahead of time, ensuring safer work sites, avoiding disruptions and work stoppages that can cause extensive delays and down the line. These agreements make sure construction is top-notch and projects are on time, on task, and on budget. Back in February, I signed an executive order to make sure federal construction projects use these project labor agreements. It's a big deal that Intel is using one here, and I thank them for that. And Intel is going to build a workforce of the future right here in Ohio. As you already heard, Intel committed $50 million to partner with community colleges and universities like Ohio State University, including Central State University, the only historically black university in Ohio, to build a pipeline for students in the semiconductor industry. The director of National Science Foundation is here, Dr. Ponch. He's here, and INF and Intel are going to invest $50 million each to support these kinds of partnerships.
President Biden in Licking County, Ohio, groundbreaking for the new Intel semiconductor chip plant. He also said it's time to bury the label Rust Belt. He suggested the area be rebranded as Silicon Heartland. An article at Fox News Channel, Ohio Democratic Senate nominee Tim Ryan has insisted that President Biden should not run for the White House in 2024, saying it is time for a generational move for both parties amid a poisonous political atmosphere in America. Ryan's remarks, which were made during a Thursday evening interview with Youngtown's WFMJ-TV one day before he is slated to appear alongside Biden during his visit to the state to tour a new semiconductor manufacturing facility from Intel near Columbus. That reporting from Fox News Channel. Here's the portion of the interview with Tim Ryan from Thursday.
And you say you have not asked and you do not plan on having President Joe Biden campaign for you. Why not?
Well, I'm not really asking anybody. I'm not one of those guys like, oh, I need someone to come in and help me. I've been doing this. I know what I'm doing. I know what I believe in. I know where I'm from. I know who I'm fighting for. I don't need anyone else to gum that message up. I wanted people to look at me and ask me questions, and that's why we've been in all 88 counties. And look, I agree with Biden on chips and infrastructure and some of these things, and I disagree with him on he's not being tough enough on China. We're not going enough in on natural gas. So I fight him on some of these things as well, on some of the border stuff. I think he's made some big mistakes. We've got to be firmer on the border. So when I agree with him, I'll agree with him. When I disagree, I'll disagree, but I will be the messenger of this campaign.
You just listed off his performance. Do you think he should run again in 2024?
Well, my hunch is that we need new leadership across the board. Democrats, Republicans. I think it's time for a generational move for new leaders on both sides. I think the environment politically across the country is poisonous, and people I think want some change, and it's important for us to, I think, on both parties, these leaders who have been around for a while. I think it's time for some generational change, which of course I've been trying to do for a while now.
Tim Ryan, Democratic congressman from Ohio and Senate candidate, Thursday night on WFMJ-TV. The Republican nominee in that race is J.D. Vance. The Cook Political Report currently rates the contest as leans Republican. On Wall Street, the Dow up 377, NASDAQ up 250, S&P up 61. Now to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Newsweek reporting that Russia has deployed helicopters and weapons in the occupied Ukrainian Kherson region in an effort to round up soldiers who had deserted their positions, according to Ukraine. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine wrote in a Facebook update Friday afternoon that significant losses and the unwillingness to fight were contributing to a deterioration in the moral and psychological condition of occupying Russian troops. The number of deserters is also increasing, it said. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken meeting today with the NATO Military Alliance country representatives at NATO headquarters in Brussels, Belgium, after he and the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg holding a joint news conference. Reporter asking about the Ukrainian counteroffensive that has pushed Russian forces back.
Thanks a lot. Thomas Kutschka, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. A question to you, Secretary Blinken. We've seen this astonishing move of Ukrainian forces in the northeast of their country, pushing possibly 50 kilometers into Russian-occupied territory. How do you explain that? It appears the Russian army is hardly even fighting. Is it on the brink of collapse in that area? Do you have an explanation for that? And do you see this potentially as a turning point in this war? And a question to Secretary General, if I may. You're constantly making the case for member states to send more ammunition, more arms to Ukraine. One of the replies we are constantly hearing from our defense ministers is that it would compromise capacities that they have pledged to NATO. So when push comes to shove and member states do have to make a decision on either supporting Ukraine or holding up their commitments to NATO, what is your suggestion? What's the right decision to take?
Yes, I'm happy to start. Thank you. Let me say two things. First, what we're seeing is that the counteroffensive that Ukraine has put in place with strong assistance and backing from many other countries is now underway. It's early days, but it is demonstrably making real progress. It's focused in the south, around Kherson, in that area, but we're also seeing Ukraine not only hold the line in the Donbass and in the northeast, but, as you noted, make a significant advance, moving some 45 to 50 kilometers in one area past what had been the existing Russian line. I think it's too early to say exactly where this will go, when it will get there, and exactly where it will end up. But I think we can say that Ukraine is proceeding in a very deliberate way, with a strong plan, and critically enabled by resources that many of us are providing. But fundamentally, and I think this may explain more directly the answer to your question, why am I absolutely confident in the success of the Ukrainians in pushing back the Russian aggression, whether it's in the northeast, the Donbass, or in the south? For one simple, basic reason. This is Ukraine's homeland, not Russia. People are fighting for their homeland. They're fighting for their future. And while we can calculate the benefits of weapon systems and financial resources, it's hard to put a value on that determination to fight for one's own country, except to say that it's invaluable and the single biggest difference maker that I think we'll see play out over the weeks and months ahead.
NATO allies have provided unprecedented support to Ukraine with the weapons, with ammunition and other capabilities. And of course they have done that mostly by reducing existing stocks. And you are right that of course some allies are now raising the issue of whether these stocks are depleted too much. My answer to that is actually twofold. One is to realize that the weapons, the ammunition that we are providing to Ukraine are used to stop the aggressive actions of Russia against an independent sovereign nation in Europe, which is a close partner of NATO. And if President Putin wins in Ukraine, it's not only bad for Ukrainians, but it is also dangerous for all of us. So actually, by ensuring that that President Putin does not win in Ukraine, we are also increasing our own security and strengthening the alliance by proving that we don't allow that kind of behavior close to our own borders. So the use of these stocks actually helps to increase our own security and reduce the risk of any aggressive actions by Russia against NATO allied countries. Let me also add that more than 80% of Russia's land forces are now dedicated to the war in Ukraine. So, of course, what happens there matters for the total capacity of Russia to pose any threat to any NATO allied countries. So my first message to allies is that we welcome the unprecedented support. We are calling for even more support, and we urge them to dig deeper into the inventories, to the stocks, to continue to provide the supplies that Ukraine needs immediately. And we see that this is making a huge difference on the ground, because as Secretary Blinken, Tony just referred to, we see progress on the ground in Ukraine. But make no mistakes, we have to be prepared for long haul. The second answer to the concern about the level of stocks is, of course, to produce more. And therefore, we are now in close contact with the defense industry, with capitals. We have established structures here at NATO on defense planning, on capabilities, to ensure that we are now ramping up production, that we are replenishing the stocks, both to be able to continue to provide support to Ukraine, but this is not only about supporting Ukraine, it's also about ensuring that we have the weapons, the ammunition, the capabilities in place for our own deterrence and defense.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg and Secretary of State Antony Blinken, joint news conference at NATO headquarters in Brussels, Belgium. From Associated Press, President Joe Biden will mark the 21st anniversary of the 9/11 attacks on Sunday by delivering remarks and laying a wreath at the Pentagon, the White House said. The day will commemorate the 2001 terrorist attacks when hijackers took control of commercial planes in order to use them as missiles, crashing into New York's World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and a Pennsylvania field. Nearly 3,000 people died in the attacks by al-Qaeda. Jill Biden, the First Lady, will speak Sunday at the Flight 93 National Memorial Observance in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Vice President Kamala Harris and her husband will go to New York City for a commemoration ceremony at the National September 11th Memorial. That from AP. Today at the Pentagon, there was the annual 9/11 attack staff remembrance ceremony. One of the speakers, the Deputy Defense Secretary Kathleen Hicks.
Like December 7th, November 22nd, September 11th is one of those days that anyone old enough to remember knows where they were and what they were doing. Those of us who were here bear a special responsibility to tell our stories. Last year at this commemoration, I told my story of evacuating the building from my office between quarters 8 and 9, going immediately to pick up my then toddler-aged son from the child care center that until that day operated in North Parking, and somehow over many hours making our way home. Today, I want to reflect on other stories from among our fellow Pentagon employees. People like Mark Lewis, who helped wedge open a pair of double doors so people could get out of quarter 4 and into the A-ring. And Natalie Ogletree, who stayed with a badly burned coworker and comforted them until they could get to a hospital. And John Baxter, who led a medical team into the fire to search for wounded colleagues and treated patients in this very courtyard before moving to the triage location near the PAC. Mark, Natalie, John, and I, and Admiral Grady, we were among the 20,000 people present at the Pentagon that day, and all of us have a story. It would take hours to tell them all, so we don't. And yet, we cannot let these stories, our history, be lost to time.
Deputy Defense Secretary Kathleen Hicks at today's September 11th attack remembrance ceremony at the Pentagon. Sunday is the actual anniversary day of the attack, and C-SPAN radio and television will be live from the Pentagon beginning at 9 a.m. Eastern. President Biden will be at that ceremony. And after that, C-SPAN will go to the observance in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, with First Lady Jill Biden. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word to get the stories Washington is talking about, sent to you every day. You can subscribe at c-span.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Every day we're taking your calls live, on the air, on the news of the day, and we'll discuss policy issues that impact you. Coming up Saturday morning, we'll talk about the letter from former Defense Department officials concerning civilian and military relations with Patrick Patterson, a professor from National Defense University. And in our Spotlight on Podcast segment, we'll feature Congressional Dish, a podcast that examines the inner workings and effects of congressional actions, with its host, Jen Briney. Watch Washington Journal live at 7 Eastern Saturday morning on C-SPAN or on C-SPAN Now, our free mobile app. Join the discussion with your phone calls, Facebook comments, text messages, and tweets.